Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Back in the 1970s, it probably was, when Japanese companies began to start building cars in the United Kingdom or to import cars into the United Kingdom in considerable numbers, they had a very informative advertising campaign, which went something like this: "Our cars don't half work." Now, the beauty of that is that in the way of English, of course, this really exaggerated the fact that their cars were really very good. But on the flip side, it also pointed out that the English cars were really not quite so good because, in fact, they didn't half work. That means that probably half of the cars just weren't functioning properly at all. Okay, so on the positive side, the Japanese could make a very nice advertising campaign, and on the negative side, they could then give the English motor trade a really very good kicking. When we come now to domestic abuser perpetrator programs, if I said to you, these courses don't half work, then you would anticipate that I was thinking that they were really very good. However, the sad side of the story is that they don't half work. And even worse than that, when Cafcass forwarded 909 men to perpetrator programs, DAPPs, they weren't able to really say how many of the men completed that work. But when on a Freedom of Information request, I asked how many of the men got midway reports, the answer came back that less than 33% of the men got midway reports, from which we could then begin to deduce that not only do the DAPPs not half work, they very probably don't even 1/3 work, and more likely still, they don't even 1/4 work, all of which casts that particular effort by Cafcass in a very bad light indeed. And that very bad light for Cafcass translates into an even worse light for families in the United Kingdom, because vast numbers of men, mainly, get separated from their children. And it works like this, that the man goes into a family court, he is accused of a number of abuses of his female partner. She gets legal aid to support her in her claims of domestic violence against him. The allegations are looked at in the court, and on the balance of probability, the judge decides that the man is either guilty of this or not guilty of this. If he is guilty of it, then of course he is guilty. And if he doesn't admit that he is guilty, then he's not entitled to the one of the 909 DAPPs which Cafcass would forward him to. If once he's realized that he can't get any closer to his goal, perhaps of being able to have contact with his children, he then changes and says, well, yes, actually, okay, I was guilty of it. Then Cafcass will turn around and say, well, he obviously lied at the beginning, and now he's just saying that he is guilty of it just so that he can get on the program which would allow him to see his children. On the other side, the woman makes 6 allegations of various forms of abuse, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of which might get believed. If it doesn't get believed, she's not accused of lying and found guilty of that. And the children remain in her care and are open to all of the further abuses which she might try to impose on the children in keeping them separate from their father. Of course, there are cases where individuals do need to be separated from their parents. I'm not saying that in the slightest, but at the moment within the family courts, there is a travesty of justice going on that bars effectively men from having contact with their children and effectively stops the children from having contact with their father. Is that something which society really wants? I would suggest it very probably isn't.